What if everything you thought you knew about the war in Ukraine was only a fragment of the truth? What if, behind the flashing headlines and viral combat videos, a deeper, more insidious campaign is shifting the entire trajectory of the conflict, one that rarely makes it into the news cycle? Imagine a war not just of armies and explosions, but of nerves, networks, and the silent collapse of systems that hold a nation together. This is not just speculation. It is the hidden reality of Ukraine's war, a struggle as old as conflict itself and as cutting-edge as the latest technology. Consider for a moment the events of the past 24 hours. While most of the world was asleep, a series of precision attacks struck deep into Ukrainian territory. In Kyiv, the capital, and Odessa, a vital port city, command centers and infrastructure were hit with uncanny accuracy. These strikes were not random. They were surgical, aimed at the heart of Ukraine's ability to coordinate, communicate, and survive. The targets were not just military installations, but the very nerve centers where senior Ukrainian and Nato officers orchestrate the defense of an entire nation. Historical precedent underscores the gravity of such attacks. During the Second World War, when the Allies targeted German rail hubs and communication centers in Operation Chastise, it was not the bombs themselves that caused the greatest damage, but the disruption of logistics and morale. In the Vietnam War, the United States Operation Rolling Thunder sought to destroy North Vietnam's infrastructure, with the hope that it would break the enemy's ability to wage war. The lesson from history is clear. Wars are often won and lost, not just on the battlefield, but in the silent spaces where supply lines, communications, and energy grids intersect. Today, in Ukraine, these lessons are being applied with chilling precision. According to several sources, some of the latest strikes may have penetrated NATO command bunkers, underground fortresses where top officers from the alliance direct operations, plan counterattacks, and coordinate the flow of Western arms. If true, this represents a seismic shift. Striking such facilities is not just a tactical blow, it is a psychological one, sending shockwaves through both military leadership and political corridors in Europe and North America. There are also fresh, credible claims that convoys carrying essential Western weapons, missiles, ammunition, and armored vehicles have been intercepted and destroyed. These convoys are the lifeblood of Ukraine's resistance. Imagine, for a moment, the logistical ballet required to move dozens of tanks, hundreds of crates of shells, and thousands of gallons of fuel across contested territory, under constant threat of air and drone attacks. A single destroyed convoy can mean weeks of lost effort and millions of dollars wasted, not to mention the potential for a sudden collapse in frontline defenses. While global headlines continue to focus on the visible drama, tanks advancing, drones buzzing overhead, soldiers taking ground inch by inch, the real war is shifting into an entirely new phase. It is a war of innovation, where new tactics and technologies are rendering old doctrines obsolete. Electronic warfare, cyberattacks, and precision-guided missiles are now as important as soldiers in trenches or tanks in the mud. In the current conflict, control of the airwaves and data streams can be as decisive as control of territory. To ignore these patterns is to misunderstand the true direction of the war. If leaders and the public base decisions on incomplete or outdated information, they risk making grave miscalculations, ones that could not only doom Ukraine's defense, but also destabilize the security architecture of Europe, and by extension, the world. Imagine the consequences if a misread of the situation led to an escalation between NATO and Russia, or a sudden collapse in public support for aid based on misplaced optimism or despair. To truly understand what is at stake, we must look beyond the noise of daily headlines. We must ask, what is the hidden campaign reshaping the war's future, and why is it so vital for the world to pay attention? Last night marked a turning point. Instead of sporadic clashes at the front, Ukraine was hit by a coordinated, multi-pronged assault deep in its rear, an escalation reminiscent of the shock and awe campaign during the early days of the Iraq War. In Kyiv, a city that has become a symbol of defiance, a synchronized barrage targeted command centers buried beneath layers of concrete and secrecy. These were not just administrative buildings. These were the hubs where Ukrainian and NATO officers plan, direct, and adapt the ongoing defense. Eyewitness accounts and video footage from the aftermath reveal the extent of the destruction. Massive fires raging for hours, plumes of black smoke visible for miles, and scenes of chaos as emergency crews rushed to contain the fallout. Ukrainian and Western officials moved quickly to downplay the incident, but satellite imagery and independent analysts suggest a significant loss of both Ukrainian and foreign personnel. If confirmed, this would represent one of the most damaging blows to the command structure since the conflict began. Almost simultaneously, Odessa, Ukraine's vital Black Sea port, was rocked by disaster of its own. A ferry, reportedly carrying a high-priority shipment of Western arms under Romanian military escort, was struck and destroyed. The cargo, likely consisting of anti-aircraft missiles and precision-guided munitions, represented not just a significant material loss, but also a blow to the credibility of NATO's support. Unconfirmed reports suggest casualties among the foreign escort, with injured soldiers quietly evacuated to hospitals in Poland and Germany. This mirrors similar incidents in past conflicts, such as when supply convoys in Afghanistan or Syria were ambushed, resulting in a sudden loss of both material and morale. For civilians across Ukraine, these attacks were not abstract. In Lviv, Kharkiv, and countless smaller towns, air raid sirens wailed. Rolling blackouts left neighborhoods in darkness, while authorities pleaded with residents to ration electricity. Hospitals switched to emergency generators, and parents huddled with children in candle-lit basements. These were not just military strikes. They were systematic attempts to cut the arteries of resistance, energy, logistics, and communication. The escalation did not stop there. Dnipro and Zaporizhzhia, cities once considered relatively safe, found themselves under targeted attack. Ukrainian air defense sites, believed to be well protected, were destroyed. In Dnipro, these included installations that had shielded industrial zones. Now, with those defenses gone, factories and refineries stand exposed. In Zaporizhzhia, a critical airfield used for launching drone sorties was rendered unusable, severely limiting Ukraine's ability to retaliate or surveil Russian movements. At the front, the momentum is shifting. In towns like Pokrovsk, Mirnohrad, and Kupiansk, Russian forces are advancing methodically, overturning the narrative of impregnable death zones for attackers. Despite dramatic footage of destroyed Russian tanks and bold statements from Kyiv, military analysts, both Western and Russian, agree that the offensive is not stalled. Instead, Russian troops are grinding forward, capturing ground street by street, and forcing Ukrainian defenders into shrinking pockets of resistance. This echoes the attritional battles of Stalingrad or Verdun, where progress was measured in meters, not miles, and the psychological toll often outweighed the physical. If these attacks represent a new strategy, one aimed at systematically dismantling Ukraine's command, energy, and logistics networks, the implications are profound. This is now a war of attrition, where the ability to generate power, move supplies, and communicate can mean the difference between survival and collapse. Ukraine's resistance depends not only on the courage of its soldiers, but on the resilience of its infrastructure and the ingenuity of its engineers and logisticians. As the dust settles, uncertainty reigns. Will Ukraine's allies find ways to adapt to this relentless new strategy? Can they keep the flow of aid and intelligence alive in the face of precision strikes? Or will the hidden war for infrastructure and resilience tip the balance in ways that no amount of frontline heroics can reverse? Despite the endless images of burning warehouses, shattered factories, and battered convoys, Ukraine's war machine continues to function. How is this possible after years of relentless bombardment? The answer lies in Ukraine's unique industrial heritage, a legacy of Soviet-era planning that prioritized redundancy, survivability, and adaptation. Retired General Popov, an expert on the region's military-industrial complex, explains that Ukraine's defense industry is not a monolithic enterprise, but a networked ecosystem. Factories are dispersed across the country, often connected by underground tunnels and hidden supply routes. Production lines are designed for redundancy, If one site is destroyed, others can ramp up output almost immediately. This approach echoes the Soviet deep battle doctrine, which emphasized the importance of depth, flexibility, and the ability to withstand massive losses without collapsing. When missiles strike, work does not stop. It shifts. Heavy machinery is moved into bomb shelters, or even ordinary garages. Assembly lines are broken up and reconstituted in secret locations. Workers, many of whom are veterans of previous wars or Soviet-era civil defense drills, adapt on the fly. This constant movement makes the defense industry extraordinarily difficult to target. During the Second World War, similar tactics allowed Russian industry to survive the devastation of Operation Barbarossa, relocating entire factories east of the Urals in a matter of weeks. A second pillar of Ukraine's resilience is the steady stream of Western support. This aid is not limited to weapons. It includes repair programs in Poland and Germany, covert supply runs of spare parts, and funding to keep workers on the job. Even when warehouses are destroyed, new shipments arrive, or components are cannibalized from damaged equipment. In the First World War, the Allies' ability to keep supply lines open across the Atlantic was decisive. Today, the airlift and overland routes from Europe play a similar role for Ukraine. Yet, this industrial system is a patchwork, a Frankenstein's monster of old Soviet equipment, Western electronics, and ad hoc repairs. Insiders describe production lines held together by ingenuity and desperation, where a single missing circuit board can halt an entire batch of drones. Nevertheless, this battered system continues to surprise both friends and foes with its ability to bounce back after each new blow. But Russia is adapting as well. No longer satisfied with attacking only visible depots or factories, Russian forces are now targeting the energy sources that power everything: electric grids, substations, and fuel depots. Without electricity, even the most secret facility falls silent. The recent blackouts in Kyiv and along the front are not mere inconveniences. They are strategic strikes designed to cripple Ukraine's ability to repair, resupply, and resist. This creates a dangerous paradox. Underestimating Ukraine's industrial resilience risks strategic blunders. Overestimating the impact of each strike leads to complacency and missed opportunities. In the end, the battle for energy and logistics is a shadow war, one that will intensify as both sides seek new ways to break the deadlock. As the conflict grinds on, the struggle for infrastructure and logistics is shaping not just the outcome, but the meaning of the war itself. Every blackout, every rebuilt workshop, every risky supply run adds a new layer of complexity. The real front line is not just the trenches, it is the fragile network of power stations, bridges, and railways that keep a nation alive. If Ukraine's energy grid collapses, the result could be catastrophic. Hospitals would close, factories would halt, and millions could be plunged into darkness and cold. This is not theoretical. In the Balkans during the 1990s, NATO's destruction of Serbian infrastructure led to months of hardship for civilians and a rapid erosion of military capacity. For months, Ukraine has raced against time, working to build redundancy into its systems. Generators, batteries, and fuel are hoarded. Businesses and hospitals bid against each other to secure scarce resources. Every major facility now has an emergency plan, often involving layers of backup systems, a practice reminiscent of how London survived the Blitz, with underground hospitals and decentralized command posts. But improvisation has its limits. Diesel and gasoline are finite, and spare parts are running short. Russian attacks are increasingly precise, targeting not just power plants, but the substations, rail junctions, and bridges that form the arteries of Ukraine's war machine. The goal is not just to cause panic, but to gradually wear down the country's ability to function. Each destroyed transformer or bridge may seem minor, but over time, the damage accumulates. Supply convoys are delayed, repairs are rushed and seldom perfect, and the system becomes ever more fragile. General Popov describes this as a surgical campaign, systematic, iterative, and unrelenting. The aim is not to deliver a knockout blow, but to engineer a slow, spreading failure. The nightmare scenario is a cascading collapse, where entire regions lose power, heat, and supplies for days or weeks, with no quick fix in sight. If that tipping point is reached, the consequences could be dire. Ukrainian forces might lose the ability to reinforce positions, manufacture ammunition, or even maintain basic communications. Civilians, trapped without electricity or heat, would face humanitarian crises. The war would no longer be confined to soldiers and front lines. It would seep into every home, every neighborhood. Already, this invisible campaign is forcing a strategic rethink among commanders and politicians. Every new attack on infrastructure prompts fresh debates about priorities. Should more resources go to defending cities or to shoring up the front lines? How much risk is acceptable when sending repair crews into contested zones? These are not theoretical questions. They have life and death consequences every day. As Ukraine's leaders scramble to adapt, the question becomes, how long can these improvised defenses hold? The answer may determine not only the course of the war, but the fate of millions who depend on the resilience of a nation under siege. Forget the idea of sudden breakthroughs or dramatic victories. Right now, the war is being decided by invisible attrition, not by headline-grabbing battles. This is a conflict measured in corrosion, not in explosions. Russia has recalibrated its strategy for a campaign of slow, deliberate destruction. The targets are not just tanks or soldiers, but the entire network that keeps Ukraine fighting: supply convoys, electrical substations, ammunition dumps, communications hubs. Each strike is a calculated attempt to undermine Ukraine's ability to repair, reinforce, and resupply. Front lines shift slowly, if at all. Every day brings new losses: vehicles, trained personnel, critical equipment. Replacing these is becoming harder as resources dwindle and Western support comes under strain. In the First World War, the attrition of men and material ultimately broke the armies of Europe. Today, the slow depletion of Ukraine's resources threatens to do the same. Western aid, once delivered in vast convoys, now arrives in smaller, delayed shipments. Political debates in Washington, London, and Brussels further slow the process. Sometimes, promised shipments never arrive at all. These gaps ripple outwards, undermining morale and cohesion, not just among soldiers, but among civilians who wonder how long the nation can endure. Beneath the visible conflict, political dynamics are changing. As Ukraine's position grows more precarious, both sides reassess their willingness to negotiate. Every downed drone, every sabotaged railway, shifts the balance of power at the bargaining table. The longer Ukraine's support lines are stretched, the greater Russia's leverage becomes. Victory may not come with a bang, but with a whimper. It may arrive quietly, through suffocating pressure that weakens resistance until there is little left to fight for or to negotiate over. This is a contest of patience, endurance, and systemic wear, not just of firepower or bravery. If we focus only on the spectacle, burning tanks, dramatic videos, we miss the real fight. The true war is waged against the backbone of Ukraine's resistance, its supply lines, energy grid, and industrial core. Every strike on a substation or bridge is a move in a slow, grinding campaign to sap Ukraine's capacity to function. The stakes could not be higher. This conflict is about more than Ukraine's fate. It is a test of international alliances, the credibility of security guarantees, and the very fabric of the global order. Mistake spectacle for substance, and we risk misreading not just today's events, but the alliances and crises of tomorrow. Invisible forces are at work. Supply lines vanish, infrastructure strains, negotiating positions erode. Victory will not be declared in headlines, but in the ability to endure and adapt while others falter. The real measure of power is resilience and resourcefulness, not just battlefield drama. So ask yourself, can you see through the fog of war? Do you recognize the subtle strategies shaping history? The outcome of this war, and the world that follows, may depend on whether we can. If you have followed only the dramatic footage, you have seen only half of the story. The real fight is unfolding in silence, in darkness, in the relentless battle to keep a nation alive. And in that fight, every decision, every adaptation, every moment of resilience counts. As history has shown us, from the sieges of ancient Rome to the blockades of the 20th century, wars are won not just by armies, but by the societies that can endure, adapt, and outlast their adversaries. Ukraine's future, and perhaps the future of Europe, hangs in that balance. Never underestimate the power of the unseen, the networks, the systems, the will to endure. For in the end, it is not always the loudest explosion that decides a war, but the quiet persistence that keeps hope alive, day after day, night after night.